All right, my friends. Well, the question on the theme slide this morning is, are you ready? Are you ready? It's a new school year coming. And even if you aren't a family or a person who's in the school, it's still a change of seasons. And that means it's, in many ways, an opportunity for a reset. With a change of seasons, a new school year, all those things, it changes our schedules. And of course, as we're aware, I think so often, when it's time for new routines and things get rolling, it gets busy in a hurry. And I think it's so easy that all of a sudden life is just happening to us, and it can feel like chaos. And so I want to talk with you today, about how we can be intentional in doing life together in meaningful ways. And so what I want to talk about is a time for a reset, a time for us to strengthen both your family and your faith. And whether you're in a home with children, or you are living alone, or you're near the final season in your life, I think all of this is applicable, because it's always time for us to keep growing, and it's always important for us to be looking for ways to connect with one another. So I want to jump in with our reading today from Deuteronomy. And in this passage, God is speaking to the people about what is central and core to their lives. It's an invitation to put God at the center. It's an invitation to make a foundation in our faith. And so listen to this from Deuteronomy 6. Listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. And you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I'm giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home and when you're on the road, when you're going to bed and when you are getting up. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your foreheads as reminders. Write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. So this is an Old Testament passage written to the Israelites, and of course, their central idea of faith all had to do with the law, right? It was the 10 Commandments and then all the other pieces around that instructed them how to live the way God wanted them to live. And so their understanding of faith was that we need to follow all the rules perfectly. And so this passage was a call for them to focus their energy and their attention on learning those things and ingraining them in their lives. Well, of course, for us, as Jesus has come for us and Jesus has reset our understanding of faith, we understand that it's not about following rules, it's really about a relationship. It's about our relationship with Jesus, our relationship with God. And it's about how we live into that each and every day, each and every moment. It's an invitation to put God at the center of our lives. It's an invitation to make Jesus our foundation, our grounding, our center place, really that anchor that keeps us held even in the midst of a storm. And so I think the bottom line here is, if we are to have a clear direction, a sense of peace and purpose in our lives, then we must intentionally put God at the center of our lives. And in our culture, I think this is an incredibly difficult thing, isn't it? From the moment we wake up to the end of the day, we've got one thing after another on our schedules, one thing after another vying for our attention. We have devices, usually in our pockets, that are constantly saying, hey, look at me. There's something for you to look at here. And we're distracted and we're overwhelmed. And so many of us are anxious and all of those things. And we see those numbers skyrocketing, and we see those, especially in our children, those numbers skyrocketing. And so today I want us to talk about this opportunity for a reset and an opportunity to be intentional in building in a healthy routine into our family. And what I love about this idea today is that this isn't about restructuring everything, but it's about being intentional with just the last 5 to 15 minutes of your day. And of course, for those of you that have been around here, this isn't new. We're going to talk about the Faith 5. And so this week and the next couple of weeks, I'm going to introduce the Faith 5 to you, and we're going to walk through it. But what I want you to hear is this, that honestly, by taking 5 to 15 minutes at the end of your day and being intentional, you can totally revolutionize what happens in your home and what happens in your heart. And so really, this is about living, sharing, and growing in faith together. Okay, living, sharing, and growing in faith together. That's bottom line what this is all about. So let's introduce the Faith 5 to you. For those of you that are new, the word faith in this instance is actually also an acronym. Faith acts in the home. Very simple. This is things that we can practice. And so, as I said, it's 5 steps for 5 to 15 minutes, and really it's one major change for good. Now, here's what's cool about the Faith 5. It was developed by Dr. Rich Milheim, who's also a pastor, and he's somebody that has spent a lot of time studying psychology, sociology, and neurology. And so we're going to talk about those different aspects of why this is so important. So today's a little bit of a science bend on things, but I hope that you will dive in with me and consider the difference this can make in your family. I'll also say that as I was preparing this week, it was a bit of nostalgia for me, for Ann and I, as our daughter was married this past week. We've spent a number of moments going, wow, what just happened, right? And looking back and saying, how did that go so quickly? But also, really, it's filled with so many precious memories and moments. And at the baseline for us is this, the Faith 5. This is something that we as a family have been practicing a long, long time. And we don't practice it perfectly every night, but we practice it regularly. And it's made a huge difference for us. And so here's the bottom line I want you to hear. And any of you that have spent time around our children know that our children are pretty great. And yeah, I'm biased. I'm certainly biased. But our children are pretty great. So here's the thing. Our babies end each night with a kiss and a hug, and they hear the words, I love you, and they get a cross marked on their forehead, and they hear a song of faith, and they are blessed. That happens for them every night. And as Rich Milheim explains, he says this is what happens. As they close their eyes and drift off to sleep, with all the toxic cortisol sopped out of their bloodstream and all the healthy chemicals that love, security, and safe touch provide, they slip into their dreams. This is setting the stage for a life that is healthy, a life that is vibrant, a life that is resilient. And so I want to read to you the preface here from his book, Holding Your Family Together. And I'm going to actually read some different passages from this as we go along today. But just think about this with me for a moment. And even if you are in a home that doesn't currently have children in it, there's still so much here that applies to you. And there's still so much here that can be applicable to your faith growth and the relationships that you're in. And even if you're somebody who lives alone, the Faith 5 is something you can practice with other people who are important to you. But listen to this as we wade into this today. Rich Milheim says, imagine raising a daughter who wouldn't think of going to bed without talking to you about her highs and lows every night, even though she's 16. Imagine raising a son who won't turn out the lights without asking you about your day, praying for your highs and lows, and blessing you. Imagine growing up in a home where everyone feels loved, valued, and heard every night. A family that seeks God's wisdom, will, and word at the center of their lives. An intimate community where every night is an experience of caring, sharing, comfort, and peace. Now imagine that. Now some of you might say that kind of sounds like pie in the sky kind of thing. But as someone who's just seen their first child get married, I can tell you that this is doable and possible. And this is often what we experience in our home. And it's not a home where everything is happy and great all the time. But it is a home that's filled with a lot of love and laughter. And a lot of very powerful and important things happen. So again, a bit of a disclaimer here. Certainly this series this week and the next 2 weeks is particularly geared for folks with children in their home. It's certainly geared for those people, and we are aiming to equip families to raise their children in the faith. We want to raise children who are happy and resilient and thriving. But also, if you're in a home that doesn't have children, I want you to remember a couple things. As I said, this still applies to you and to your life. These are important practices for any relationship. And of course, this can apply to time you spend with nieces and nephews or grandchildren or others in your life. But also, for those of you without children in your home right now, I want you to understand this. It's important that you hear why this church focuses on this so much. Okay, we are at a time in our world, in our country, where people and children especially are struggling mightily. Right? And as we see this epidemic of stress and anxiety and depression and all these things, We are a church that's actively doing something to equip families to change the course of where things are going. Okay, understand that this is bottom line changing the course of things. And so I want you to know that you're a part of a church that's doing something really important. And while we watch the news and we wonder about all that's going on and what we could possibly do, we need to be reminded that we can do something in our own home. We can do something with the people that we do life with. It starts right then and there. And that's what all of this is about. And so I want to invite you into dreaming with me in all of this about how we can change things, about how we can make life different for ourselves and for those who we do life with, okay? So a little intro here about what this is all about. And so I'll be reading on and off from Rich Milheim's book, Holding Your Family Together. It says, this book is all about hijacking your nightly routine, injecting the DNA of Jesus into the nucleus of your family cell, planting seeds of faith just before your kids drift off to sleep, and harnessing the untrapped power of a good night's sleep to incubate faith in your children's hearts, minds, and spirits one night at a time. Now, one thing that Rich Milheim has discovered or learned in all of his study is the importance of sleep for our overall health. And not just any kind of sleep, but good sleep. And good sleep includes healthy dreaming. And it includes REM cycles where our unconscious things from the day are sorted through and sorted out, and we're able to make meaning of our lives. And one thing that's really important that we so often miss is what we do right before we go to sleep directly impacts what happens in our brains while we're sleeping. And so this is why the recommendation is to do this as the last thing before you go to bed. And the idea is before the first person in your home goes to bed, call a family meeting, and you spend the 5 to 15 minutes to practice the Faith 5. So before that first person heads off to sleep, you do that together. And all the good stuff that happens during the Faith 5 is then planted in the brain when sleeping takes place. And hopefully, because of having experienced this together, that sleep is much more restful, much more peaceful, and much more healing for your body. So here's what we're going to do as we kind of go through today. Today I'm going to introduce the first part of the Faith 5, and that is sharing highs and lows. And so the next 2 weeks, I'll introduce 2 more each week. But today, we're going to start with sharing. And with each of these pieces, we're going to talk about those aspects, the psychological, the sociological, the neurological, and the theological benefits of sharing highs and lows. Now, some people call them highs and lows. Some call them roses and thorns. You also might call them, if you're kind of a church nerd, you might like the phrases your glorias and your kyries. Your glorias meaning your praise be, and your kyries are your Lord have mercies, okay? Whatever works for you is just fine. But another way also that people think about highs and lows is their sense of the presence of God and the absence of God in their life. And so it's a way of saying, today I most felt God's presence when this happened. And, at this other time, I really felt like God was distant from me. Now, notice I say I felt because we believe God is right there with us all the time, but we don't always feel that way, do we? And so we can think about it in those terms. Yes? They're happies and they're sads. And so this is something that we do intentionally on Family Faith Night. All of our main teaching happens by Anna in the large group, and then the kids go in their small groups to do highs and lows together, to build community, to build relationship. And this is why I ask confirmation parents to come to confirmation with the kids. It's interesting because I've had people assume that, the issue is for crowd control. No, we have great kids here, and I don't have any trouble with our kids. But we want to equip our parents to be comfortable and confident sharing highs and lows at home and living out the Faith 5. And so we practice faith together in confirmation. So every night when we do confirmation, I have 35 to 40 kids and at least one parent with each of them filling the fellowship hall, and we practice this stuff together. It's vitally important. So let's dive in and look at those aspects here, and just bear with me, but I want you to be open to how this could really change things in your home and for your family. And as we enter into a new season, it's the perfect time to set a new routine, to start and try something new again. So here's the psychology of sharing highs. Starting the night out on a high sets the stage for an overall positive experience. Sharing highs creates a feeling of well-being, even regarding what might have seemed to your children as a horrible, no good, terrible, very bad day. Sharing highs and lows, especially highs, validates both the person and the high. It models healthy communication, it engenders caring, fosters acceptance, and teaches appreciation. So sharing the positive triggers even more positive. As I think research shows, research on happiness shows that if we believe that if we want to have lifelong satisfaction, then we need to engage regularly in positive thinking, not only about ourselves, but also in sharing our happiest events with others. We need to learn to savor those positive aspects of our lives. And at a time where the world is just filled with so much negative all the time, and we so easily get dragged down into all the hard stuff, we need to be able to stop and look for the good. We need to be able to stop and point out the ways that actually I have things in my life to celebrate, and we're going to celebrate them together, which really moves us into the sociology then of sharing our highs. You see, sociologically, sharing joy, laughter, and the positive events of the day creates new bonds and strengthens old ones. Right? When we celebrate together, important things happen. We're bonded in important ways. This is, again, about building relationships. I'm proud and blessed to say that I have teenagers in my home, and they talk to me on a regular basis. And we laugh together, and we have fun together, and we share a lot of joy. But my children are used to sharing those things with me. We've been doing it all along. Well, let's look a little bit then at the neurology. This is, for me, the fun stuff when you get to the brain science. And we're not going to wade way into the weeds, but we are going to go into the weeds here a little bit today. Because there's so much that happens in our body on a chemical and a hormonal level that we're just not even aware of, right? And so you need to hear some of these things to get an idea of why these conversations are so important for us. So Rich Milheim says, neurologically, sharing a high triggers a cascade of positive and powerful neurochemical transmitters that bolster immune systems, regulate hormonal systems, improve digestive tracts, slow down the aging process, and trigger positive electrochemical exchanges throughout the brain and the body. Ooh, that's a lot of stuff there, isn't it? Here's the thing. As you recall and relive your highs, a subconscious smile spreads across your face. Your heart may begin to race. Joy and laughter bubble up from inside as an electrical message flows from your brain at 100 yards per second. The memory message speeds down your neurons to the ends of each wire-like cell where little bags of chemicals are waiting to be released. There, the electrical message changes to a chemical message and jumps across the space between the neurons, the synapses, to bond to proteins on the other side. The electrical message changes to a chemical message and then back into an electrical message. And in an instant, all through your body flashes an electrical chemical charge that shouts out to every cell, I feel good. Now, I love how Rich Milheim says this here. He says, what does this mean? Free drugs. If you teach your children how to dispense the natural highs our Creator built right into our bodies, maybe they won't need to grab the pills, the bottle, or the needle one day when they're feeling down. Okay, that's really important and powerful because we're in a society where we need drugs for everything. And sometimes they are the right and important thing that we need to do. But I think all too often we are just missing out on the natural chemicals that God has built us with because we're not practicing how to make those things pop, so to speak. Okay? And I shared this in the last service. In my family, oftentimes I'll say that highs and lows go a lot longer than I want them to go. Usually by the time we get to highs and lows, I'm like ready to go to bed, right? And I have children who love to share stories and laugh. There's just a lot of laughter in my home and a lot of storytelling, and we get together to do highs and lows, and it just goes on for a while. But what a precious gift. And I oftentimes have to remind myself because, I want to get to bed. And I have to remind myself, no, this is really good what's happening right now. But a lot of laughter and a lot of love. And all that laughter and storytelling and love makes really important things happen in their brains, and while then they drift off to sleep. Well, let's talk about then what this means theologically. Obviously, God intends for us to share our joys with one another. Part of being in Christian community is we celebrate who God is and what God does in our lives. We share those things together. But ultimately, this is about reclaiming and reframing our days and the ways we think about what's happening. And again, as our kids are launching into school, as we're establishing new patterns, it's important that we look back on the day and think it through from a God lens. Now, we're living at a time where people just don't practice reflection anymore, right? From the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep, we're busy, 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 and we have things coming at us all the time wanting to grab our attention, whether we've just got the TV on nonstop or we've got something in our pocket that's always saying, give me attention. We don't stop to reflect and pay attention. We also, my friends, don't stop to learn to listen to one another. And isn't that something that in our society right now is needed more than ever? We don't listen to each other anymore because we don't practice sharing and listening. So listen to this piece about reclaiming and reframing. Sharing a high reclaims, renames, regains, and reframes the day as God's good gift. It teaches that life isn't all bad and that, in fact, it contains a lot of good. Sharing a high lifts us to an attitude of gratitude and lowers us to a deeper appreciation for the giver of all good gifts. Now, friends, this is important. I want you to think about this for a minute. It's natural for most of us to go through a season in our life where we really question God and we really question our faith. And I think that especially happens oftentimes in teenage years. And that's a normal, natural thing. But I think one of the things that's hardest about that is so often we haven't taught our children how to look for God in their life. And so obviously when they don't experience God's presence, of course it's natural to say, well, I don't see evidence of God anywhere, so God probably isn't there. When we practice this from the beginning, it's a whole lot easier for us to see where God's at in our lives, to take note of that, and that sticks with us in powerful ways. Okay. Well, you've heard the highs on this, or the bits of this on the highs. Let's switch to the lows quick, and I'll try to go through this quickly. But sharing lows is at least as important as sharing highs. Again, during a time in which depression and anxiety and all of that is skyrocketing, a big part of that is we don't have safe spaces to talk about the hurts. And we go through life carrying around these traumas that we just stuff inside, and it all comes out sideways in other kinds of ways. And so sharing highs and lows is also about creating sacred space where we can share those wounds that are on our hearts and in our minds. So let's talk about, I lost my place. Here we go. If you only know your child's highs, then you don't know them. And if you only know their lows, you don't know them. And if they don't know their highs and their lows, they don't know themselves either. Okay, that sense that we so often easily feel that our lives are just out of control, that everything's just getting overwhelming, so much of it is because we're just not grounded. And we're not allowing ourselves to have sleep where our brain is sorting out all that stuff. And so when we take time to reflect and identify the highs and the lows, it allows us to get to a place of peace and rest to say, okay, my life is in control. I'm okay. And I have loving people around me who I can rely on and trust. Can you see how that changes the way someone sleeps and how they feel when they enter the next day? So here's the psychology of sharing a low. Sharing lows gives you a better understanding of yourself and others. Growing up with a forum and format and lifelong experience in verbalizing one's lows aloud within the context of a safe, loving, non-judgmental home every night gives a child a huge advantage when it comes to these three things. A huge advantage when it comes to building capacity for mental health, emotional resilience, and spiritual maturity. Okay, hear those three things again. capacity for mental health, emotional resilience, and spiritual maturity. I think all three of those issues are epidemic levels in our society right now. They are. Here's an easy, practical way for us to get at these things. And it's as simple as developing a family routine where every night we just say, we're going to do this. We're going to do this together because we know over the long haul, this matters. This really matters. So in the midst of sharing our lows, we're able to name those hurtful things. And when we can name things, number one, it keeps us from just stuffing them down in a way where they come out sideways later, but it also can take the power away from scary things when we name them. When they're brought out into the light, then we can have healing. And we also learn that we have others we can rely on. And that's the sociological piece of this, recognizing that you're not alone, that you have caring people around you who will walk with you through the difficult stuff. So how about neurologically? What happens when we share the lows? This is important stuff. What happens neurologically when we share a low? Well, it's like sharing a high. A message comes from the brain at 100 yards per second. It speeds down to the ends of the neurons, and little bags of neurotransmitter chemicals, aminopeptides and endorphins, are released. They jump across the synapse and bond to a protein on the other side. And all through your body, at 100 yards per second, flashes a painkiller. And as Rich Milheim points out again, more free drugs. More free drugs. Did you know that when you cry and release the pain, the chemical composition in your tears has a higher concentration of dopamine than do your tears when you laugh? Dopamine is a pleasure enhancer and a painkiller. A good cry is powerful medicine. Crying also releases tension, cleanses toxic stress hormone from the body, and increases the body's ability to heal. Not bad side effects for a drug that is free and self-dispensable, Right? Have you ever cried so hard that you were exhausted afterwards, but also afterwards you felt great? Okay, well, why wouldn't you give those same free drugs, God's good medicine, every night to the people that you care the most about? Not that every night's going to turn into a good cry. In fact, often 9 times out of 10, highs and lows will go by without any tears. But it's that one night out of 10 where something really needs to be shared, where that really powerful healing can take place. And because the routine is built in, that opportunity is there for that hurt to be shared. So isn't it interesting to think about how God designed our bodies? That we actually have these chemicals within us that are released to do the important things that make us more healthy. So we also can understand why the isolation of COVID has been so damaging. We also can understand why having devices in our pockets that we're looking at 24/7 or TVs that we're just blindly watching and listening to that keep us from actually having meaningful conversation. It's easy to see why we find ourselves at such a difficult place. Right? I mean, the way that you learn to play baseball is to practice playing baseball. And the way that you learn to dance is to dance. And the way that you learn to sing is to sing. And the way that you learn to listen is to practice listening. And the way that you learn to share your feelings is to practice sharing your feelings. It's kind of no-brainer stuff, isn't it? So I'm inviting you today to consider a reset for your family. To consider a new routine of 5 to 15 minutes a day where you just put this into practice. And Anna and I sent our first one out of the nest a week ago. And it's been a fun week of thinking back and reflecting and going, wow, look what God did here. And it's been fun to celebrate. And been fun to say, wow, we did pretty well. And we have a young lady who is incredibly close to her parents and sometimes shares more than Jake would appreciate her sharing with us. But actually that was one of the really fun things for us when quarantine first happened. Jake lived with us for about 3 months. And And oftentimes it was Jake who would say, well, when are we going to do highs and lows? When are we going to do the Faith 5? And we did it every single night. And of course, you all remember back to when quarantine first happened. And we all just stopped all the craziness. And at first we didn't know what to do with ourselves. And then we realized, oh, this is kind of nice. And of course, the isolation got to all of us. And we were blessed to be in a home with lots of people. And so that was really wonderful for us. But we don't forget the wins that were in that, and the intentional conversations that happen is really powerful. All right, my friends, we're going to wrap this up here. I just want to go to the theology here of lows for a moment. Not only does God intend for us to share the highs and celebrate, but God intends for us to grieve with one another. Real, authentic community happens when we not only share the good stuff, but we share the bad stuff. And New Heights is a church where we've always said, you don't wear masks to this place. Well, we're wearing masks today, aren't we? But this is a place where you can show up and be your real self. In fact, we hope that you will do so. Because in this place, real, authentic relationships happen because we're honest about the good and the bad. Because we're sinners and we're saints together, and all of that comes with life. So God intends for us to share these together. And sharing lows teaches our children that lows are a part of life. Sharing lows before God in a trusted Christian family or a family of friends shows your children that they are never alone. Admitting disappointment, weakness, fear, and anger out loud is what healthy people do. Okay, let me say that again. Admitting disappointment, weakness, fear, and anger out loud is what healthy people do. It reinforces the church at its most elemental level. That's what it means to be church together and what it means to be healthy people. We share these things. So, that's a lot to think about for today. I thank you for bearing with me. Let's talk about a reset. Let's think about how we can restart some things here in our own homes. Start some things over again that can set us up for the long haul, for some really beautiful things that are good for us, for our relationships, and for our families. So let's pray. Let's pray. Awesome God, this life continues to come at us 1,000,000 miles an hour. And we so easily, Lord, fall into habits and routines that are filled with distractions, that pull us away from one another rather than bringing us together. And we so easily, Lord, lose sight of who you are and what you want for us. And Lord, you know the pain that we feel each and every day and the strain in our relationships. And God, we just ask that you would help us. Help us to do a reset in our homes. Help us to take some time each day to just stop and talk with one another. To look at the highs and the lows, to spend time laughing and loving, crying and caring. God, be with us as this new school year begins, as the change of seasons happens. Help us to be intentional. Intentional to put you at the center. To make space for you to be that grounding foundation in our lives. To build something for our children that will change their lives forever. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.